Hello and welcome to the Graphic 45 YouTube channel. My name is Lynn, or LV Handcrafted here on YouTube, and today I am going to make this perpetual calendar. It measures 5 by 7, it has a built-in stand, and it is wire loop bound at the top. And today I am going to use the Life's a Bowl of Cherries collection by Graphic 45. And the nice thing about perpetual calendars is that they don't have a year or day of week associated with them. So it's a calendar you can use all year long and year after year. Without further ado, let's make this. Okay, so I'm gonna start by cutting down the cardstock that I'm using, which is an 80-pound ivory solid color cardstock. This will be my base. And I'm gonna cut it to 7 inches wide by 5 inches tall. You will need 12 of these. And after I cut this set down, I will also cut 12 of the exact same size, 7 inches wide by 5 inches tall, of pattern paper. So one of the goals I had with this project is to be able to use the 8x8 papers so that if you have the 12x12 collection, you can kind of save that for larger scale projects. And the second and probably my main goal with this project is to actually simplify it from the version that I shared and created on my own YouTube channel, which is LV Handcrafted. With that one, well, have you ever had an idea pop in your head and you just really had to try it out? And so you don't really think too much about it besides the overarching concept, and you just go with it and figure it out each step along the way. That was the experience of that first project, and as a result of not really planning things but rather just feeling inspired and rolling with it, there was a lot of custom wire binding, or cinch work as I like to call it, because I use the We Are Memory Keepers cinching tool. And with this version, my big goal was to simplify the binding so that it's really easy and you don't have to do any, what I like to consider, custom binding work, where you're using the cinch in ways that it can accommodate, but ways that might not be the fastest, easiest, or simplest to understand. So that was my goal with this one, and I think I hit that goal. So I'm really happy with how this turned out, and I'm really happy with how easy the cinch work ends up being, and you'll see that in a moment. For now, though, what I'm doing is I'm going to attach the two layers that we cut. So one is 80-pound ivory solid color cardstock. The other is pattern paper from the Life's a Bowl of Cherries Graphic 45 paper collection. And what I'm aiming to do is, by attaching both of these, and they've been cut to the exact same size, I'm not using the ivory base as a matte layer where you have that border of that ivory color showing through. You're not going to see the ivory from the front. The reason to have it is, as a perpetual calendar that I hope to, I don't know if I'm going to keep this one or gift it, but whoever's going to use it, I hope that it, stands up to the test of time. And with these panels, you're going to be flipping them around the loop binding every day and every month as you change over the date and the month. So I want it to hold up. I don't want it to feel flimsy, and that's the main reason why I've reinforced it. And I used ivory because as you flip it over, it's not going to be the primary focus, but you might see it from the back. And with this paper collection, ivory works really, really well with it. So I've gone ahead and that's the reason why I chose that particular color, but you can use anything you'd like to match or coordinate with the paper collection that you're using. And I like to just do a 1/4 inch rounding at the bottom 2 corners. And if you're using a directional paper, it's a really good idea to do this step because then it makes it really easy to identify your bottom edge. And I made the mistake, you might catch it at some point, but I made the mistake of not checking the direction of my paper, and one of my pattern papers is actually upside down. But I think it's a little hard to notice, so hopefully if I keep this, I'm not too worried, but if I gift it, I hope it doesn't go noticed. So with the cinching, what my first step is to always create a template. So I already know what I'm doing when I get to this point where I'm punching through my project. But all you do is you punch all the holes in the standard setting with that left-hand guide that can slide out with that fully pushed in. Then there's one more hole you have to punch, and you want to pull out that last peg so that it doesn't accidentally punch. Slide your project over, and then on that left-hand edge, there is a peg that you can push to lock into a previously punched hole. So you only want one hole exposed on that left edge, lock it into place, and then punch again to get that very last hole. And that's all the punching. That's all the punching that we're gonna do. Now, we do need to cut out this rectangle at the top. And again, I found a way to simplify this. So if you have a blade trimmer like I do, drop your blade in 2 3/4 inches from the top edge, and then cut all the way to the outside cutting edge. The reason why I dropped the blade in the center is that way, as I'm cutting out, because we're cutting through 2 layers of cardstock here, the force of cutting, I can just go ahead and swipe it all the way off the edge. Whereas if you're cutting from outside the edge downwards into the middle of your project, you really have to slow your cut. So here I don't have an option. I have to slow down my cut so that I don't accidentally cut further than I intend. And so with this middle cut, all I'm doing is cutting from one line to the other line that I cut earlier. So that's how I remove that rectangular section at the top. Now, this is that leftover piece. That's the rectangle section that we cut. Don't throw that away. We still need it. So I'm going to cut off I'm going to cut this down so that it's 2.5 inches tall. So you just want to cut a 1/4 inch off of the bottom edge. We want the holes at the top. So this is how everything's going to look when it is bound and on the loop. So with this piece here, the way that I've designed this is that I have one hole as a spacer, so you can see here it fits exactly there. And if you're using a pattern like this, what you might want to do is actually cut off the spacer holes if you want the pattern to really look seamless. So I'm going to cut off one hole off that left-hand edge. Each hole is about 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to cut 3 holes off. That's for one of the numbers. Cut off another hole. And then I flip it to the other edge just so that it's easy to hold. And then I cut off one hole from what was originally the leftmost edge. And what that ultimately gives me is 2 pieces that are that measure 1.5 inch by 2.5 inch. So 1.5 inch wide by 2.5 inches tall. And they each have 3 holes at the top. Now for a pattern like this where I don't really care if it's a seamless pattern because you're not going to be able to notice. All I do is cut off 1.5 inches from one end. And for some of these panels, I actually don't need to cut down all of them. So, for example, this is the full set of what you need. You need the numbers 0 through 9. and you can choose any of the patterns that you like. You will have some left over. And then you need a smaller set that's 0 through 3. So 0 through 3 represents the tens digit, and 0 through 9 represents the ones digit. And that way, between the two sets, you can have all of the numbers in any given month from the 1st of the month to the 31st of the month. So that's all you're gonna need, and you will have leftovers of that middle section with the holes that have been punched through. You can save that. It's a little bit thick. You can use it as maybe a chipboard, almost, it's not quite as thick as chipboard, but you can use it as a decorative element on future projects. So I wouldn't toss that. It's nice and thick and stable. Now this piece here, it measures 1 3/4 inch high by 3 3/4 of an inch wide, and I am 1/4 inch rounding all 4 corners. This is going to be the backing plate for where I put the abbreviation of the month. So there's an example there. And so what I'll do is, again, I'm just going to use some solvent glue. The difference between a solvent glue and a craft glue or a PVA glue is that your white glues are typically water-based. So a PVA glue is going to be water-based, and craft glues are generally water-based, meaning that they will actually soak into your paper. Anything that's porous, it will soak into, and that creates a really strong bond. But paper does have the potential to warp. It has the potential to take on lines or anything that's left by the paper fibers actually being disrupted by this glue soaking in. So a solvent-based glue, because it's not water-based, it will not have warping and you won't see those lines. So that's why I switched over to this, because I noticed with my ivory cardstock, it wasn't with the Graphic 45 papers, it was with my ivory solid color cardstock that I was seeing some of the glue lines come through. Okay, so now we're here looking at what will be the stand, and I've also simplified how to make the stand here. So this piece I have cut to 7 inches wide, so it measures the same width as the panels earlier, but it's a smidge taller. So this actually happens to be 5.5 inches tall. And I've cut my ivory solid color cardstock. Again, this is 80 pound, which is all you really need. Lighter weight can work too if you have 65 pound. But what I've done is cut a piece of ivory cardstock so that it's about an inch taller and an inch wider in both directions. And that way I have a nice glue tab here that I can just fold over to wrap this piece of medium weight chipboard, which is available in the Graphic 45 shop. Before I started gluing stuff down, I did miter those corners, and as you saw, I don't use any special tool, but there are tools on the market if you want to be really precise. But what I like to do is just cut off at roughly 45-degree angle the corners, aiming to have the bottom edge of that triangle about 1/8 of an inch away from the corner of the cardstock. That way, the corner of the chipboard. That way I know my chipboard gets covered 100% and it doesn't have an exposed edge, especially when you are wrapping in a lighter color than your cardstock. And then I do like to burnish as I go, and I've learned from a bookbinder to kind of tap on those corners with your bone folder or burnishing tool, and that actually takes the sharpness off of those corners, which I think looks nicer and also just prevents you from poking yourself with a sharp corner. So now here's the easy part. I have 2 separate pieces, and the stand is simplified in that instead of having this piece connected as if it was, say, the album of a mini album, it's completely separated, and what's going to help this stand is just this bit of ribbon. You can use some lovely graphic 45 ribbon if you'd like, because there is the ivory color. I chose to just use a ribbon out of my stash because you're not going to see this, and I'd rather save my pretty ribbon for projects where you're going to actually see it. But all I've done is cut a stretch of ribbon that's about 5 inches long, and I attach about an inch of it onto one of the bottom edges. I leave myself about 3 inches that's kind of exposed, that's between the two covers. And then I attach again from the other end about another inch into the cover. And what this ribbon piece serves is it will keep your project, your stand, from doing giraffe eggs and continuing to spread apart and collapse down. So when this is stood upright, the ribbon won't allow these two cover pieces to be further apart than that loose bit of ribbon that's in between. And so this was one of those things that wasn't the first idea that came to mind. The first idea that came to mind is how I just instinctively thought to create the stand, which was to actually have 2 bits of chipboard that form a mountain. And they basically, serve the same purpose of connecting the front and the back cover of the stand so that it can't just lay flat again. So that binding method for me is really easy because that's actually how I generally make my albums. But when I sat down to think about how I could simplify this project overall, that's when I came up with this bit of ribbon, because you can wrap your 2 cover pieces separately and then just attach this little bit of ribbon and that will do the trick. And of course, you can hide that ribbon, as I have, with another piece of ivory cardstock, which, by the way, I was running precariously low on this ivory cardstock, and I am so glad I had enough to finish the project, because I don't know that I can find the exact same color again. And so really, really glad that I literally have 1 sheet and scraps of this ivory cardstock left. But through these 2 cover pieces, so on the top edge, the edge that does not have the ribbon, I'm punching it the exact same way I punched the panel. You just punch all the holes down and then slide your project out enough so that you can lock one of the previously punched holes in the locking mechanism, and then you punch one last hole. But don't forget to pull out that last peg so that you don't accidentally get a partial hole punch off the edge of your project. So now the actual binding. So what I'm going to start with is I will I've already cut down my wire, my loop binding. This is a 2-1 pitch wire loop binding. And the 2-1 pitch is important because that's for this cinch, and this binding tool is the spacing of the holes. So a 2-1 pitch means that for every 1 inch there are 2 loops or 2 holes. And whatever binding system you use, you just want to make sure that you're using the correct wires that match up with the holes, and the brand doesn't matter. It's the 2-1 pitch that matters. So I've set all of the months in from top to bottom. It's January to December. For the numbers, the right-hand side goes from 0 to 3. On the left-hand side, it goes from 1 to 9 and then 0. Although technically everything flips in order, so it doesn't really matter, but that's how you would use it anyways. And then I've got a front cover that I made, and so I put that on next. And then I put on my stand. So I've got my front cover, my numbers, my months, and then my stand. Both the front and back cover, they are attached at this point with the ribbon. So so they go on, basically at the same time. And the reason to do it in this order is so that the ends of your wire loop, the binding wire, where it pinches closed, that actually will get hidden between the front cover and the stand. So here's everything all done. You can see how well that stands up. And when we flip that front cover over, it's actually going to, you probably won't see this front cover again because if you're using it, you're only going to be flipping through month to month, or each of the day to represent the date. And so there's really no practical reason to flip back to the front cover, but it'll always be there. And the wire ends are going to be hidden so that you don't see them. They're going to be in between that front cover and the back of our stand. And that just keeps everything looking really neat and professional, and nothing can accidentally slide out as you're actually using the calendar. So it does serve a practical purpose to bind in that order because the ends of your wire loop aren't exposed, and so as you flip through, nothing's going to get caught and accidentally slip out. And so you can see I can flip through each of the months, and then when the year ends, I can flip it all the way back to the beginning. I did choose for some of the pattern papers that I thought looked really nice if you could appreciate it as a full scene. This was one of the pattern papers. I made sure, because on the left-hand side, you only have 4 numbers to work with. So I chose pattern papers that I thought were really pretty to be able to see in full. And that way, at some point in the year, there's going to be one day of the year where everything will line up and you can actually see that full pattern in both the month and in the year. And so there's going to be only 4 days of the year where everything lines up. So that's an example of what I mean, where the 2 numbers, the tens digit and the ones digit, has the same pattern as the month. And that is my perpetual calendar project. I hope with this more simplified version, you'll find it easy to do. If you want to catch the other version, it's already posted onto my channel a couple months ago, and that was featuring the Flower Market. So thanks for catching this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.